Boy, am I tired today. As He's Territorial Squad, I'm your host Harvey Green and welcome back to the X-Territory. So for those who don't know, I'm a big media fan and Batman is my second favourite superhero of all time. And recently the new Batman Caped Crusader show came out and I was curious about, well, I might as well watch it, maybe give a review after watching it, and I decided to do something different today by actually doing that review because, I do music, not, shows, you know what I mean? This isn't going to be like a proper full-on review. I might do one in the future. I'm just doing like a first impressions review right now because I've just watched the show today. I guess I'll just give my basic thoughts on, what I saw. Not really too in depth after all. Like if I wanted to get a proper opinion, I'd watch it again. But this is my opinion for right now, pretty much. Before it begins, I want people to understand I initially already had low expectations. I heard a bunch of news, I heard about J.J. Abrams running the thing, Harley Quinn and Penguin, and I had very low expectations because, they were all like red flags in my head, like, oh, they're making big changes, it's not going to be good, it's going to be a certain way, and it's not going to be like how I'm expecting, it's all this same stuff. But even then, I think, it shouldn't really matter, right? You can make changes, you can make like a different show and still have it work. So, let's see, did it really work out the way they wanted it to, or were my expectations correct? Was it just sort of a disappointment? And immediately that's where I do get into my first big criticism when watching it, and this is sort of outside of my expectations, but I do think it's something that needs mentioning, and it's the animation quality. There are points where it's alright, but for the most part it's really janky, and I did not like the animation whatsoever. I thought it was kind of bad for the most part. There are points where the characters obviously aren't moving a lot, and I understand that's a normal part of animation. That's just, you'll see that everywhere from The Simpsons and Family Guy, all those shows. It's just a common thing for animation, but it was very noticeable in this show. And, that's kind of weird to, point out. And some of the animation, how it goes from, the choppy, normal animation style to, a very smooth, digital style. It felt very awkward and, it was sort of weird to watch on screen, and I did not like the animation style at all. Yeah, animation bad, that's my point. Another thing that I think with the animation is problematic is how it bogs down the designs, because some of the designs are nice, for the characters and shit, but I'm sort of done dirty by the plain animation and the lack of shading. There's some level of shading, but there's not a lot. There's this one scene where Batman's in the Batmobile, he's driving through in the dark, and then there's the shadow going over him. That scene looks good, but then there's other scenes where he's just standing in the light and he just looks flat, sort of, and, it's not very appealing. And I guess I should move on to that bit, and that's the characterization, because, again, a lot of the characters are very different. One thing I dislike about this new Batman is how unfeeling he is, and I know it's not necessarily he doesn't care, because there are aspects of him which are obviously good, when he saves the children from the burning building, and how he throws the gun at the end. There's certain stuff which just feels weird, like him calling Alfred Pennyworth, and I'm sure people have already memed about that or joked about that. I think I've seen that, but it has to be brought up. It's just weird. I don't think Batman's ever done that, ever, in comics. I'm probably wrong about that, but it feels wrong. Why not just have him call just have him call him Alfred? That's what he's always done, right? And if you're gonna call him Pennyworth, maybe have it once as a one-off joke, or maybe once or twice, as just a throwaway line, not a common thing. That's just sort of weird. Beyond that, I didn't have too many issues with Batman himself. A character I did have issues though is Harvey, at least at the beginning, because when they introduced Harvey, they really built him up as sort of a head character, and my idea of Harvey Dent would be a little egotistical. Obviously, there's that sort of ass personality to him, but he's very a good dude. His intention is to help the city, and I feel like they didn't capture that through the first few episodes. They started to improve upon that as it went on, but from the moment I met him, I was expecting a very different character, and that already tipped me off, and I did not like that. Of course, I think they got Two-Face mostly right. His transition to Two-Face was pretty good, I dare say, and I did like the switching between like mindsets. I think they could have done more with it, especially after having him killed, but for what it was, I do prefer that over the non-Two-Face Harvey Dent. But one of the big changes in a character was the Penguin, and I mean, I think we all know what the change is now. Right off the bat, whenever I'm like hearing, oh, blank character's going to be turned into a woman, I'm always sort of like, oh my god, this again, because like it's so overdone, and most of the time when it's done, like they do nothing really with it, and more often than not, it's just sort of a gimmick just for the sake of changing a character into a woman. Like there's no actual like purpose for it. And again, here it feels pretty much like that. I think they translate it fairly well, but again, what was really the point other than saying, oh yeah, look, Penguin's a woman now? Like, it just seems sort of silly to me. If you just take a normal version of Penguin who is a man already, I don't think this episode would really change that much. Obviously stuff like, oh, the cabaret lady stuff would change, but like you could just throw another character in there anyway to take that place and have Penguin just do his thing. This just sort of felt like a silly change for the sake of, ooh, we're being different, and like it did nothing really. I did not care for it. Like, this wouldn't have been any different had it just been normal Penguin. I did like this version of Clayface though, and I do think Clayface was a cool one. Obviously he's kind of a hammed up character. It was sort of simple, like how he plays that hammed up villain role. But I do kind of like that for Clayface, and I do think, it works with who he is, Basil Karlo, as an actor. I feel like Catwoman could be a bit more complicated though. She was sort of done dirty. I think that's a big problem with a lot of these villains though, because they're only in one episode, but I mean, I feel like you can do a lot in one episode to characterize someone. For example, Harley Quinn was characterized fairly well in this one, in her one major episode. My issue is the characterization. It's not Harley Quinn, and this is a mindset I've developed over time. I'm a big fan of classic Harley. When I see this new interpretation of her, who is like no longer with the Joker, that's always like, yep, we're going down this road again. And here's my mindset. This new version of Harley, I'm like the characterization, I do like the concept, I do like the design, like it's all fine. I just wish it was not Harley Quinn, because it is not Harley Quinn. The whole point of Harley is that she relies so heavily on the Joker, and take that away from her, you basically completely swap her character. Make her an original character, give her an original name. I don't see why you can't do that. Of course, Barbara Gordon was, fine for the most part. There was nothing necessarily weird about her. I mean, they definitely made her different by aging her up and, being like the lawyer type figure. So there was stuff like that, which is sort of like, yeah, cool, I guess. I mean, I preferred versions of Barbara. But again, like, ultimately, every character, just as a character, is fine. It's just weird choices were made, and I'm not necessarily huge on them. It's like, they just seem very simple overall. They seem very, like, basic. But that does bring me into another point, considering, like, characters and their personality, and it comes to the dialogue, and this is one thing I do have to complain about. The series has like a 1950s, 60s setting. It's based on like the golden age of comics and like old school Batman. It's very old school Batman. There are points where like the dialogue seems to fit, but there's also points where the dialogue is very, not fitting. That's the thing about this show. I think if you're gonna do an old school like style show, you need to play the dialogue straight. You can, and even with like jokes or comedy, you have to play it in that style. It has to fit that era, because a lot of the dialogue in the show, in some episodes and some scenes, came off like kind of millennial in style. Like they felt sort of modern, and I mean, I understand it's a modern show, but like it, for the characters and the setting, it doesn't quite fit. I think a comparison would be like Ben 10 Alien Force, because obviously the writers are from the old DCAU era, and it's sort of based on like a 1950s setting, but the difference is that the show does take place in the 2000s, so the 50s aesthetic, while definitely there, at least any modern quippy sort of dialogue fits the 2000s setting, because it takes place during the 2000s. It's not actually part of the 50s. So like that's in a scenario where it would work because it is a modern day series, but this is clearly not based in the modern day. It's based back in the day where people would not have talked like that. You know, for the sake of the style and aesthetic, you need to play into that sort of stuff. Some of the dialogue did take me out of it quite a bit, so that was a little frustrating. Other than that though, like soundtrack was fine, like some of the story was fine. Like I wasn't really huge on the story. Again, very plain. I feel like, you know, the 2000s Batman show and of course the original Batman animated series do a way better job of pretty much everything. I mean, and I do mean everything. I think it's weird to think that a show from the 90s looks like way better than a show from 2024, which has been made by Amazon Prime, you know, the most expensive company in the world. Again, it's 2024, like every frame of this modern era should make every episode from the 90s look like garbage in comparison. But how does a show from the 90s, like, majority look better than this? Like, it looks cleaner, the animation's nicer, the art is like, it's just works better for me, and it's weird to think about that. And I feel like this is Batman, you know, this is a big hero, everyone loves him, everyone's going to come and watch this and they're going to expect it to be good, so there's no reason to not go balls to the wall and go fucking crazy with the money, you know what I mean? Like clean animation, every single episode should be looking like a bloody Disney film from the bloody 50s, right? Like there's no reason why there should be like janky animation. Well, there is, like it feels like cheaper than some of these older shows do. Outside of the Batman animated series, a show that did come to my mind as a comparison when watching it was the 2004 The Batman show. The 2004 animated series, it's called The Batman, and it's sort of underrated, sort of not. I feel like some of you Batman fans probably have heard of it. The thing about that show is it's got a lot of similarities. It's a more modernized version of Batman for the era. Different art style from the animated universe. There's a lot of changes to characters and villains, and they do a lot of like unique stuff. The big thing about the Batman show is that the animation is high quality and much better than this one. 2, the changes are very drastic and very noticeable, making the show unique. B, even though there are notable changes, the core of the characters are still pretty much the same. 4, even though it has a more episodic vibe, they stick very strong to character stories and they really fit it into, you know, making you give a damn about the characters. And more importantly, number 5, it actually feels like a Batman show. Something I hadn't thought about when actually talking about this, and I probably should have mentioned it, but bear in mind I'm going off unscripted, is it doesn't really feel like a full-on Batman show. He feels sort of like to the side, and I don't think we got enough of him throughout the show. I really do think we could have gotten a bit more, like, Batman, you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't quite what we got here though. It feels a lot like the Gotham PD show with Batman thrown in. So, you know, what can you really do? I probably should have mentioned this as a criticism earlier before I moved on. Voice acting. Some of the voice acting feels a little weird. Like, I'm not sure who it is that voices Batman, but his Batman voice feels a little too gruff for me. I prefer him more as Bruce Wayne than I do as Batman. Again, a lot of the voice acting felt off, like the Penguin's voice just felt sort of wrong at points, and I don't enjoy her voice too much. A lot of the characters, again, they felt like very modern, and I feel like they could have done more to help them fit the aesthetic of the era and, you know, make them sound like the old, you know, 1950, maybe transatlantic type characters. I don't know, it didn't quite do it for me. You know, I feel like they could have done more with the actual voice acting too. So from the, like, questionable character changes, the not so great animation, the semi-okay voice acting, the, you know, there's just a bunch of stuff. Like, it as a show, I feel like Caped Crusader had so much potential to be, you know, really good. For what it is, I feel like the, like, Caped Crusader, it just wasn't really anything special. It felt like, oh yeah, sit down, have a good watch and have a good laugh, but for the most part it's just kind of mid. Like, it did nothing for me really. I wish it could have been better, but it's on the lower end of stuff, sort of like the new Harley Quinn show and, you know, what else has they been putting out recently? Just a bunch of other shows like that DC's been putting out. I wasn't huge on it. I wish it could have been better, and if there is going to be a season 2, which I do imagine there will be, I'm hoping it improves upon a lot of stuff. You know, if it's going to make differences, like, at least keep to the core of the characters and, like, really go through with the differences to make them its own unique version. Because that's what I think you do when you do a radically different character. You keep to the core elements and mess about with the stuff in a way that is still similar but just unique enough to be intriguing. And I also hope one thing they do is work on the story a little bit more, because the plot itself felt very plot focused, and, you know, maybe I speak from my own experience as someone who loves writing. I feel like character will always be over plot, and the best stories are very character focused, and, you know, you should always play into that a little bit more. And I feel like that's something other Batman shows do way better, like Batman the Animated Series with, you know, it has those small episodes like the Mr. Freeze episode, the Harley Quinn episode, the, you know, the Baby Doll episode, stuff like that. It always fits well. I don't think the show did that very well. I think it fit a lot more like plot-focused storylines than character-focused. And, I mean, there were aspects of that. I feel like the Two-Face storyline did that pretty well, but, you know, I wish we could have gone a bit more, you know, integration of the characters in this, or, like, you know, built upon them a bit more. Because if you're going to do an overarching story, you have to build up on stuff and make it more, like, grand. But for the most part, it felt like, I don't know, it didn't quite do it for me. I mean, there were things I liked. I thought Onomatopoeia as a character was fascinating, and it was cool to get, you know, a cool version of him on screen. Again, I did like Harley's characterization. I just wish it wasn't Harley Quinn. And, you know, there was small stuff that I liked. I think whoever voice acted Two-Face as Two-Face was really good, and they put, like, the sinister factor pretty well. For the most part, I felt the show was underwhelming, and it could have been so much better. It's similar to, like, Ben Affleck as Batman. You have, like, you could see what it could have been, but that's not what you got, and I'm here asking for what I wanted more than what I actually got. And what I got was just generic, you know, average cartoon. It wasn't anything special. I can't give it much of a rating right now because, again, this is only the first time I've watched it, so I'm just gonna give it like a mid. I'll just say it's mid for now, and I'll leave it there because it wasn't necessarily anything mind-blowing. It wasn't wild. It didn't do too much unique. It was sort of generic average all the way through, so like probably a 5 out of 10, if you will. But I mean, that's mainly my opinion. My opinion isn't, you know, the gold standard, so if you wish to say your own opinion, I mean, if you have watched the show, what's your opinion? If you haven't watched the show, are you interested to check it out? I mean, don't let my words, you know, deter you. Like, if you still want to give it a shot, you know, go ahead, give it a watch. Give Amazon their filthy money, you fucking shills. And yeah, just that sort of shit, you know what I mean? But with that said, I think I made my point very clear. That's my thoughts on the show. Again, put yours down below if you disagree with me, and explain why you disagree with me, of course, because that incites discussion, and I think It's always interesting to have when talking about entertainment of any kind. With that said, I'm done here. If you enjoyed, leave a like. If you didn't enjoy it, waste your time somewhere else. And for those who made it to the end, do some tech.